So when you talk about labor law, they are basically laws with respect to industrial disputes or resolving disputes between the between the employer and the workers. Now, it is not something that is applicable to everyone. It is applicable only to the workers. So, an employee or a managing director or a director, they cannot claim rights under the labor laws. Your Industrial Disputes Act. This is the major act in this particular topic of labor. That is, it aims to resolve industrial disputes and to promote harmony between the employers through conciliation, arbitration, and adjudication. So, section 2 is an important section which defines what is industrial dispute and who is a workman. So, if you see in any act, I'll tell you how the flow of the act goes. Section 1 will always talk about the application. That is, to what extent is the act applicable? Is it applicable to all the industries? Is it applicable throughout the entire state? Now, some laws are not applicable to, for example, in the previous CPC, we had some sections which were not applicable to people who belong to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. In family law, we have certain sections which are not applicable to certain communities. All these things you will come to know under section 1 or article 1. Your section 2 is always definitions. Okay, so any definition comes, you will always get it in section 2. Section 3 will have something important, and it will be section 5 or 6 onwards when the actual act will begin. So keep in mind this format, that will also help you a lot. Section 3, it talks about what are the different authorities. So section 3 talks about works committee, which promotes amicable settlement of disputes. Section 4 talks about conciliation officers, which promote your mediation dispute. Then comes our section 7 and section 7A, which talk about industrial tribunals and labor courts. You have dispute resolution mechanism, which talks about voluntary arbitration under section 10A. Then comes your compulsory adjudication through labor courts and tribunals. Your provision for strikes and lockouts. Now the workers, they must give 14 days notice before your strike. If you talk about Industrial Disputes Act, it talks about strikes, retrenchment, layoff, and closure. It also prohibits strikes and lockouts during conciliation or adjudication. Then comes your retrenchment, layoff, and closure. So section 25F, it talks about conditions for retrenchment. 25N, it talks about government approval required for retrenchment in industries. And 25O, it talks about provision for closure of establishment. Then comes your important case laws, which I've already mentioned. You have your labor welfare organization. That is, organizations which work for the welfare of your laborers. So one act which promotes the same is your Factories Act. So your Factories Act, it basically talks about the safety, health, and work welfare of the factory workers. So basically, it will talk about what are the factory conditions. That is, you cannot employ children. If there are women, then that is if there are more than 10 women working in a factory, you need to have a separate washroom. You cannot call women for night duties. You cannot make them do hazardous work. In factories, men have to do only one shift. You cannot have more than 2 night shifts, okay, in a week when they are doing day shift and night shift. So all these details are given under the Factories Act. Then comes your Employee State Insurance Act. So that act talks about the medical and financial benefits which is given to the workers in case of sickness, injury, or maternity. What happens when every worker faces this challenge? Your Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Acts. So it talks about the contribution to Employees Providence Fund for financial security after retirement. Then comes your Payment of Bonus Act. It ensures that the employer, he pays bonus to all the employees in certain establishment based on the profit or productivity. Then comes your Maternity Benefit Act, which has again been amended. It talks about maternity leave and other benefit which is given to pregnant employees and new mothers. Okay. Now this Maternity Act is something that is applicable even to people who are working at a higher structure. Your Payment of Bonus Act, okay, all these acts, right from 2 to 5, all of this is applicable to all the individuals except for Factories Act. Factories Act is something that is applicable only for the workers. Factories Act also talks about factories inspector who can come and inspect your premises, and uh, in case if something goes wrong, how you cannot challenge them. Okay. Then comes your Trade Unions Act in 1926. So there is this concept in law called as collective bargaining. Collective bargaining means all the individuals, they come together and they are challenging or they are asking for one particular relief. So on the basis of collective bargaining, you have your trade unions which are set up. So your registration of trade unions happens under collective bargaining. Okay. Sorry, your trade unions are a part of collective bargaining. So you have registration of trade unions under section 3 to 9, which talks about when and in what factories should trade unions be registered. Again, as I said, section 2 will consist completely of all the definitions. Your trade unions, they should have at least 10% or 7 members as 7 workers as members to register. Then it grants a legal recognition and rights to registered trade union. The rights of trade unions are, they have right to collective bargaining. They can engage in uh, strikes subject to legal restrictions. Okay. Now, immunity for civil suits. Now, registered unions, they are generally protected from liability in tortious act if done in contemplation of landmark cases. Then you have your Minimum Wages Act. Now, minimum wages is something that also differs. Okay, every state has got their own amendments, or every state has also got their own inputs. So when you read the Minimum Wages Act, you will have to also check or in the notes corner that whether Tamil Nadu has got this difference, whether any other state has got any difference. So one, section 3, it talks about fixing of minimum wages. Second, it talks about wages must be paid in cash until and unless the employee has agreed to pay in kind. Then it also talks about how much daily you can work, how much overtime is what you can work, and what exactly is the compensation that you will get for overtime. Then comes your enforcement. Your government appointed inspectors, they ensure your compliance. Okay, these are the important landmark cases. So some common concepts that we have is, again, right of collective bargaining. That is, workers, they need to negotiate. They can come together and they can bargain. They can negotiate for what is right. Then comes your social security. It ensures that all the workers, they get all the correct benefits during their employment, post retirement. Your grievance redressal, that is mechanism for redressing disputes, retrenchment, wrongful termination. Your workplace safety and welfare. It gives emphasis on health, safety, and human working conditions. Your overview of cyber laws in India.